Hey everyone, welcome to lesson 68 of this RTS tutorial series. In this video, we'll finish finding our billeting or housing, whichever term you prefer, for our unit. That said, fire up your editors and let's get started.
Welcome back to the editor, and as you can see, I have everything from our last video still open: our unit status, our building master, our unit profile, our unit, our blackboard, our behavior tree service of unit status, and our behavior tree task of finding billeting. So what's going to happen now, if you think about what we need to do, is we're going to come into here. So if we go through our behavior tree, it checks, do we need billeting? So it goes into here, it sees there's nothing in here and goes, yes, we need, it sees there's nothing in here, so it's not valid, and it sees that, yes, we need billeting. So the status changes. Once the status changes, this goes, hey, I need something. I need to run. And so it's going to run this sequence, and what we have in the sequence is find billeting. It's going to come in here, and it's going to make casts to our controller and to our AI. Our controller is going to find the open housing. Our unit is going to then be set to accept that new housing if there's anything available. So what we need to do to get that to work is to create a function, at least in our unit controller. But we also need a function inside of our buildings to make sure there's actually space there. And so we're going to start with that. And to do so, what we're going to do is we're going to open up our residential building master. And we're going to create a new pure function. In fact, we've already been using this function elsewhere, just not as a function. So it's going to be very similar to things we've done. It's going to be very similar to what we did in the previous video. We're going to create a new function, which will be called has availability. It will be a pure function. It will have one return node. This return node will have one output, and we'll take care of that output in a second. And that's going to have our residents, not our occupants, our residents. And that's the difference from what we've done previously in the last video. We're going to get this. We're going to get the length of it. And we are going to check this length as being less than our max residence. So we're going to get our max residence as well. And I'm just going to line those bits up. Plug our max residence in, take for this return boolean, and put it there. And let's rename this as has availability. We'll also need to add a function in here once it's found availability, which will be our add resident. Let's take care of that now, actually. So this wait, let me just add this in real quick. Add resident. So this step, which I believe is step 6, so takes care of do we have availability and adding a resident. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to have one input, which will be called unit, and it will be of type unit master. Nope, that was the wrong type. Unit master, we want the object reference. And we are going to add unique. I'm just going to line those up, put a reroute or two into here because I know what I'm going to do next is I'm going to plug in an array. And we have an array called residents. So if we think about this, we're adding this in here, and that's what's getting checked there. How many people are actually going to add it in? And then the last thing we need to do is add a return node. So that takes care of step 6. Step 7 will be setting up find billeting in our AI controller. So let's go back to our main window. Let's go to our AI, open up our AI controller, and in here, we're actually going to create 2 new functions. And these functions will be find billeting and set residence. So find billeting. Actually, it's going to be set billeting as well. So these will be of status, because it's related to unit status, subcategory housing. And the same for the set billeting. Start with the find billeting. What we're going to do in here is we are going to go through every building there is and find the residential buildings, and then of those residential buildings, see is there availability. If there is, then the unit will accept that as its new house. So how do we do that? Well, we have to loop through something, but we only want this loop to occur up until the point it finds the housing. So the way we do that is we do a for each loop with break. The break breaks a loop. It stops it once we have the correct values. Now in the first AI video, we set up our references. We need our controller. And from our controller, we're going to get a list of constructed buildings. I don't know why I said all there. It's just constructed buildings. Plug that into there. We're going to want a little bit of room. And the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to check from this loop, is this a residential building? So it's getting all buildings. We want to get class. And we want to know, is the class that we're returning a child of our residential building master? If it is, then we want to continue. So I'm going to have a branch here. If it's not, I'll go to the next building in the loop. There we go. Now, I'm just going to move this a little bit further along. I'm going to put a reroute in here. If this is a valid target, I'm going to cast to my residential master, convert that to a pure cast, and I'm going to put another reroute in. From this pure cast, I am going to promote to variable, a local variable in particular, which will be residential local. God knows I'm probably spelling things wrong, but I really don't care. Yes, you heard me say I don't care if I'm spelling things wrong right now. I'm going to plug that into there. The next thing we're going to do, if it is a valid target, I'm also going to line these up because I can tell they're not lined up, is I'm going to check, does this building have availability? So we're going to get our resident local. We are now going to call that function we just made of has availability. If it does, then we have found the target we want. If it doesn't, then it's going to go back to the start of the loop, go to the next building, and check if that building has availability. If there isn't any building with availability, then we end up with something that isn't so positive. So we're going to create a branch here. We're going to plug that in. So if it has availability, then what we want to do is we want to set a bool value that will pass out, and this will be called found billeting local. We're going to leave this default to false. We're going to plug that into there and turn it to true. Now, if you want to be extra cautious, you can add one to the false and leave it as a false setting. I just prefer to grab off of here and to set our resident local to being empty so that nothing gets passed out. That way, when we pass resident local in, it's still an empty variable. I'm going to drag off of this found billeting local, the Boolean, and plug it into the break. I'm going to add a couple of reroutes in so I can see more easily what's going on. And I'm just going to actually put this on that line there. So if it has found valid billeting, it's going to come through here. So it has billeting. It's a valid target. So we're saying has billeting. We've set a local. We found it. We then break this loop. If we haven't, we're clearing this building from resident local to be nothing. And we're going to the next building. Regardless if it finds a location or not, eventually this loop will complete. And that is our end node or return node. Our return node is going to pass out two values. It's going to pass out the building we found, so we're going to get the building, even if it's empty, which is still useful for us. And it's going to pass out the bool value. And we're going to rename these in a second. So we're going to rename this as residential target, and as has found billeting. All right, so that takes us through that major chunk there. Let's just very quickly do our set residence. So we're just going to go into our set billeting, into our set billeting. We're going to add one node to this, or one input parameter, which will be our residence. This will be a type actor. And we are going to cast to our residential building master. This will be a pure cast. And we're just going to leave that there. We are going to get our unit reference, and we are going to get from this our profile. And we're going to set our unit profile. We're going to plug that into the start pin there. And we're going to break this unit profile, so split structure pin. And I'm just going to tuck this down here for a moment. At the end of this, we'll do a return. And then we're going to get another reference to our unit, so I'm just going to Control W that over here. We're going to get our profile. And we're going to split this structure as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass over every value except for our residence. So if you want to make this a little bit neater, what we can do is do it this way. Just drag this into here. And we're going to pass our unit name to unit name, our profile sex to profile sex, our profile age to profile age. Because if we don't set these here, and we're only passing through our residence, then it's going to erase everything else. And we need all this information to stay the same except for the residence. So we're now adding that residence to the profile. Compile save, which will mean when it does a status check, it sees this as a valid target. So we go back to our status, or unit status check here. It sees this is valid, and then sets is idle, and goes on to the next step. All right, so now that we've created those functions, we need to call those functions up, and we're going to do that from our behavior tree task of find billeting. So in find billeting, so we're going to get our AI controller that we made in the last video, and we're going to get that and we're going to get that function we just created called find billeting. And we're going to plug that into our is valid. We're also going to put a reroute in here and plug that into our unit reference. And you might have caught in the last video, I said we're going to collapse this down to our reference cast like usual. So grabbing everything, including that reroute at the end, right click, collapse down to macro, and this is my reference casts. And let's just rename these things. I wish I had done that with that open still. So we're going to move our execute pin up there. I'm just going to also finish the word execute. Our object is our controller. Our input pin is our unit master. And that just gets set there. And we'll rename that as then. So we get rid of the text. Compile, save. Go back to the event graph. So unit controller or owner controller into controller, and controlled pawn into unit master. We can now move this closer. And I am trying to deselect that and move there we go. Just line that up a bit more. So now that we found billeting, if this is a valid target, so this is, by the way, I believe now step 8. What we're going to do is we're going to pass this variable out. And this will become a target residence. We are going to pass out our bool value and promote to a variable, and this will be billeting found. And we're going to set both of those based on what's being passed out from that function. If billeting has been found is true, because remember we're passing this out even if it's false, then we are going to change our blackboard status. Sorry, not our blackboard status. We're going to change something on our blackboard, but not our status. So we're going to have a branch here. If it's false, then it's not going to change anything, and we're just going to continue back through this until we eventually hit true. So what we're going to do is we are going to set blackboard value by object. And if you remember from the last video, we set an object in here called residence. I'm going to cheat and just copy that name. And I'm going to create a new value in here called residence. I'm going to, as I said, cheat and paste that in, which will be our blackboard key selector. Remember, the names have to match so it knows what key to look for. And it's looking for this key of residence. And what value we're setting there is our target residence. We're going to use this target residence. That's why we have a value there. So this residence, actually, we're going to use this residence elsewhere. And I put a reroute in because I'm going to drag off of here. And I'm going to add this to residence. So you notice I put a reroute in. So what we need to do is we need to add our residence, which is something we set up in our target building already. That's that function we created in here of add resident. We're going to drag off of here, and we're going to add resident. I'm going to plug the executes into each other. If this is valid, remember, if they found it, we're going to pass that in and set it. And I'm going to put another reroute in here just so I have a bit of room to play with. And we are going to set this to our unit. One of the reasons we made a cast to it. Just going to move that down. The next thing we are going to do in our AI controller, so get your AI controller, is set residence, or set billeting, sorry. So set billeting is that function where we set the profile. So back to our task here. Let's plug that execute into there. And off that reroute, just plug into there, add another reroute on so it's nice and pretty. And finally, what we need to do is we need to finish execute. So finish execute. If we have found billeting, so if this is true, then we've been successful. If it is false, then we've not been successful. And we're going to pass that information along by just attaching that to the false branch. So if we have not found any billeting, then that will be false. Also, I'm just going to line all of these up so they're nice and neat. There we go. So now we have set up the entire task of finding billeting. We could have done this completely in Blueprints without using the AI, but this will run until it's found, which can actually pose some issues. You might want to set it so that it only does it when the unit isn't busy. So you might want to add in another decorator that checks, is the unit busy or not? And if you wanted to do that, because I haven't talked about how to do that, you go back to your behavior tree, and you can add another decorator. So we can have multiple decorators in there, and you would just do this one to check is busy, is not set. But I don't want to do that, at least not in this video. I might add that in later on. So what's left to do? Well, we have to make sure that this works. That's the final step. And we can cheat a tiny bit. Like I said, we could actually sell the unit to go there if you wanted, and you can if you want. We'll talk about having units move in later videos. I'm not going to do that. That would take way too long for those videos. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat just a tiny bit. I'm going to go into my widgets. I'm going to open up my unit info HUD. Again, I really need to change these naming conventions. I am going to grab the birthday box here. And that's all of its subsequent content. Actually, I lied. I'm going to grab the age box because it has all the content we need in it size-wise. And I'm going to paste that into our details box. And the details box, we actually might want to change to a size box in the future, just as an FYI. And in here, this will be my residence box, I guess. Or billeting box. Let's keep it as billeting. It will be our billeting text. And I'm just going to put billeted because can be used as a verb like that. And I'm just going to put the name barracks in. Now, the name we're going to actually see isn't going to be all that pretty. We're going to create a new binding, which I'm just going to name get billeting text. I'm going to drag that out here. And I'm going to go to my event graph. Now, because this is happening on a tick, it's going to be too hard to see, so I'm going to cheat a tiny bit and spawn a lot of units in after a moment so you can see it. If you click fast enough before the tick fully runs, you can see the name change. I'm going to do an is valid check. And on the false here, I'm going to create a text local. And that's going to be of type text. I'm going to set this to, say, needs billeting. I'm going to plug that into the return node. On my input object, I'm going to get my unit reference. So I have my reference there to my unit. I'm going to get this guy. And I'm going to get its profile. And I'm going to split the structure on this profile open. So split structure, just move this down a little bit. And we're going to check, is the unit profile residence valid? If it isn't, we're setting the text there. If it is, we are going to branch off of here, and we're going to get the object's name, which isn't going to return anything pretty, by the way. So we're going to do toString. We're just going to leave it there for a minute. Actually, I lied. We're going to leave it down here. We're going to set our text local here, and we're going to plug that into there, which will convert it to a text to string. We're going to plug that into a reroute, which I didn't create yet. There we go. Line that all up, drag out a bit, set that there. And now you might think we can test it. However, I have skipped one very, very important step and one relatively important step that's useful for testing. The important step I skipped is we've never actually set status in our behavior tree, and we need to do so. To do that, we need to go to our behavior tree service, unit status. I've already put this in a blackboard key category. Sorry, I did that between videos. So go ahead if you want to and do that. But we need to expose this by making this instance something we can edit. Compile, save. We go here. We now see status. Status is checking our bool value from our blackboard of is busy. So we click this. We have the self actor. We have status, and we have residence. Well, what we want status to do is to check status. That's what that variable is getting. So what we're doing is we're saying to this variable, this blackboard operator, what you're really doing is a status. So yeah, you could use different names actually. You could have named status in here Bob, and then just set Bob to status. It just gets really confusing. And I like being able to see status equals status. The other thing that we skipped that's important is actually putting in a barracks. So let's put a barracks into here. There we go. We'll set that to is built. And if we hit play and select one of our units, needs billeting. Let's give it a couple of seconds. Make sure it runs through. There it goes. It's switched over. And now that should happen for all our units. And we're going to add in 2 more units. Oh, that was the wrong thing. Add 2 more units in. Needs billeting. It'll switch over again in a second. There we are. And let's check the other one. There it is. If we add in 1 more unit, let's just get these in there real quick. It won't switch over because we have met the max of 6 units. We had 4 on the map to begin with, and we just put a couple of more in there, and that's unit number 7. So that takes care of finding housing or billeting. In our next video, what we'll do is we'll take care of setting up our timers for our other statuses. Then we will take care of our fatigue and hunger. That said, if you've enjoyed this series, make sure to hit the like button down below and make sure to hit the subscribe button so you know when the next video is out. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.